So I want to talk about the light reactions in photosynthesis, and photosynthesis occurs in plants which are in organisms which are autotrophs, that is, they create their own energy. And the one we're going to focus on are the plants. So let's take a look here at a plant. There we have the stem and leaves, the roots which are beneath the ground, and if you notice, these are white. And if you remember back, looking at your plant cells, your chloroplasts are what create that green pigment. So there's no chloroplast down there in the roots. And then up here is going to be a flowering plant. And no, all plants do not have flowers. You'll discuss that or learn more about that in Biology 1120. But here you will see there are the flower petals. And I want to discuss where is photosynthesis occurring in a plant. So what is the point of these major structures here of a flowering plant? Well, the flower itself serves as a reproductive structure. And that is its primary function, is reproduction. The roots are responsible for taking in water and other trace nutrients. The stem is a source of structure. Now, if this stem is green, some photosynthesis may be occurring there. However, stems are not the primary source of photosynthesis. And structure allows plants to compete with other plants and get high enough to reach the sunlight. And the part of the plant that is absorbing sunlight and performing the majority of the photosynthesis that provides energy for the plant are the leaves. And this is where we're going to talk about the light reactions of photosynthesis occurring. So let's take a look at the cells we find within a plant's leaf. And these, of course, will be plant cells, which means they have a cell wall. Within that cell wall, you will have a cell membrane. And within this membrane, you'll find the cytoplasm and all the other organelles you typically associate with a plant cell. And I'm not going to draw them all here, but there's a nucleus, some endoplasmic reticulum, a Golgi body. What's that really massive structure we have in a plant cell? The central vacuole. There's a central vacuole. And there's another organelle that is really, really key to plant cells, and that's this little green thing that I'm drawing here. These little green organelles are called, do you remember? It's a chloroplast. Now, a chloroplast is where photosynthesis occurs inside of a plant cell. This is what makes it an autotroph and makes it able to produce its own energy. So let me just blow up a chloroplast here, or enlarge a chloroplast here, and I'm going to cut this one open essentially so you can see the internal structures. You will have a small stack of what look like maybe plates or little ovals all stacked up. These individual little pieces are actually membranes, and they are called thylakoids. Each individual sac, it's a completely enclosed sac, is called a thylakoid. Now, a stack of sacs, I know you've heard me say this before, is a grana. And the space within the chloroplast that is not contained in a thylakoid is called the stroma. Now, I want us to zoom in very quickly on an individual thylakoid and find out exactly what is occurring in this chloroplast. So let's just take a closer look here at this thylakoid membrane. And know this red oval shape that I'm drawing is not your thylakoid membrane. This is just my workspace to help us stay organized. This is your thylakoid membrane. Please note that it is a completely enclosed sac. I have basically just imagined this has been cut in half so we can see what is occurring inside of the sac. It is fully enclosed. Picture like a little green blob here that's not empty in the middle but has a fluid in the middle. This is your thylakoid membrane. This is a phospholipid bilayer, much like your cell membrane. It is selectively permeable. You will have to have some proteins there to help move materials through it. Outside of the thylakoid membrane, you have your stroma, and within the thylakoid membrane, you have the inner membrane space. And this inner membrane space is not just a dead zone. It's very, very important to photosynthesis, and especially the light reactions themselves. So, involved in the light reactions in the thylakoid, you have what is going to be labeled here as PS2. That is photosystem 2. Photosystem 2 it's very important to understand what a photosystem is here, is made up of pigments. These are chlorophyll pigments. And these are what actually trap the energy from the sunlight, and they occur in these clusters called a photosystem. Most of the pigments here are what are called antenna pigments or a pigma complex, and they take in the energy. And if we waited for each one of these to get enough energy to do anything, we have to wait for a very long time. So what they do is each one that gets its energy, each of these antenna pigments funnels its energy into a central one called the reaction center. When the reaction center gets enough energy, it will actually release an electron. So go back to our other diagram. We have photosystem 2, has its own electron transport chain. Then we have photosystem 1. And so what we're going to be doing in a few minutes is following the bouncing electron from photosystem 2 through an ETC, photosystem 1. And then if you will look at what I'm drawing here at the bottom, this may look familiar to you. This is ATP synthase. And hopefully you're all getting a little bit excited, or you're at least rolling your eyes, because when you see an electron transport chain and ATP synthase embedded in the same membrane, you should know what's going to be occurring. And we'll get to that in just a minute. So what we're going to start off with is that energy from the sunlight coming in and hitting those antenna pigments in photosystem 2. So here is our sunshine. You're going to have some energy coming in that is picked up by the antenna complex of photosystem 2. It's funneled into the reaction center. That electron gets a burst of energy. It's basically ejected from the photosystem and enters the electron transport chain. It is then passed down from protein to protein in the electron transport chain, releasing energy through redox reactions. It will then enter photosystem 1. Now, photosystem 2 is in a situation that I have to correct before we can move on. It has lost an electron, and it can't just continue to pop electrons out. We've got to replace the electron that reaction center lost, and we have to do it quickly. How are we going to do that? So over here, I'm drawing the molecule that will provide this electron for us, our electron donor here. And you should recognize that little Mickey Mouse face. It's water, or H2O. Chlorophyll A is a unique molecule that is capable of splitting water. So what will happen in photosystem 2 is water molecules will actually be split once that electron is lost. And so you'll end up with the little H positive ions, or just a proton, because remember there's only one proton and one electron in hydrogen, and once you take away its electron, it's just a little proton floating around. You'll have 2 protons left, and you will also have an oxygen. An electron, that little yellow dot there, is released and goes into the photosystem, replacing the one lost from the reaction center. Now, this will occur every time an electron is ejected from photosystem 2. So eventually you'll end up with 4 hydrogens and 2 oxygens. Those 2 oxygens will bind together, and let me just write this out for you very quickly. Your H positive ions with little red dots. Your oxygens will join together to form an oxygen molecule. And these will actually leave the cell, going through the membranes of the cell to be released. Now, that electron transport chain is doing the job you'd expect. As that energy is released from the electron bouncing down through the electron transport chain, it is pumping protons into that membrane, into the thylakoid's inner membrane space, to go along with the hydrogens released from the water. Now, get back to that electron that has entered photosystem 1. It then gets another reaction center excited, and in that reactive site in photosystem 1, it replaces an electron that has been released. This electron then is ejected from photosystem 1, and instead of going down an electron transport chain, it will be placed with an electron carrier called NADP+. Now, you will see NAD later. This is different. The P is for photosynthesis. Think of it that way. That one electron gets tacked on, that makes it NADP. It can actually take on a second electron, making it NADP negative. Once it has that second electron tacked on, it will then take on a hydrogen, becoming NADPH. Now, NADPH carrying its 2 electrons. NADPH will come back to haunt us or visit us later on in photosynthesis, so keep an eye out for it. Now, get back to this electron transport chain we have. It's doing what the electron transport chain likes to do, and it's pumping protons across the membrane using the energy released from that electron. So as these protons are pumped into the membrane, you are getting a proton gradient, and this should sound really, really familiar. So once your proton concentration builds up very high inside that cell membrane, what do the protons want to do? They want to get out. And the way to get out is through ATP synthase. So the protons come shooting down through ATP synthase and they're releasing energy because they're basically being just pushed out because it's so crowded. And it's releasing energy. My little exclamation mark there for energy. What's going to take that energy? ADP comes in with phosphate. ADP, you add in that bit of energy, the phosphate gets tacked on with that energy, and you get ATP. So the light reactions of photosynthesis create ATP from ADP and phosphate, and it goes back to the energy from the sun. So now I've created some ATP and some NADPH. And this NADPH and this ATP are the products we are after in the light reaction of photosynthesis. You will see these again. They will be used to fuel what are sometimes called the dark reactions or the Calvin cycle of photosynthesis. So the light reactions of photosynthesis. The light reaction turns the sun's energy into chemical energy in the form of ATP and NADPH, and that is the goal of the light reactions. That is their purpose. The release of that oxygen molecule is just waste to the plant. It's a very big important thing for us, for those of us who are want to perform aerobic respiration, which plants will also do, but this is very important, but not so important in the grand scheme of things for photosynthesis itself. So in our next video, we will move on to the Calvin cycle, also called carbon fixation, or the dark reactions of photosynthesis.